Hi guys, hope everyone is well and staying safe. Welcome along to my new video series where I'm going to be doing a whole range of videos on coding, web design, all bits and bobs. But today now we're just going to do a little introduction into Scratch 3. Scratch 3 now is much different to what you guys have been using on my computers in the classes at the moment. It's currently available. You can download it for your PC or Mac, or you can actually use it on the web browser as well, so you can use it on tablets and stuff. I'll put the links below now in the video description. But today, we are going to build a little Pong game, and it's going to be a two-player. So you'll be able to have two paddles, left and right. Ball's going to be bouncing between. If it hits the either edge, the player's going to get a point. So, just having a quick overlook of the Scratch interface, you'll see now it's a lot different to Scratch 2, what you've been using before. The game window is now over here with our little cat here on the right hand side. Below now is all the details that we need for our various graphics and sprites. The backdrop section is much clearer and bigger now over here in the extreme right. Our code section is now here right in the center of the screen, where we're going to be building all our code blocks and stuff like that. And then over on the left-hand side is all our code sections. And it's actually really cool. You can actually use the mouse to scroll through continuously, which is pretty cool. Our costume section is up here now next to our code. And then you can also have a whole bunch of sounds. So, pretty cool. So, first thing, what we're going to get started with is we are going to delete our cat. So, below our game window here, you're going to see sprite 1. Can they hit the little X here on the bin? And we are going to add a backdrop straight away. So we hover our mouse over our choose backdrop, and we're going to select the little looking glass icon, choose backdrop. Now what you'll notice, the layout now is completely different, but it's I find it much easier, but also there's really cool new backdrops and stuff like that. So for the moment, I'm going to go into the space section, and I am going to use Galaxy. So that looks pretty cool. Now, there's going to be 3 sprites in this game, 2 paddles and a ball. So we're going to add our first sprite. So again, we just hover over here, just like the backdrops, and we're going to go choose sprite. Now, we can going to hover down, and I'm going to find the paddle. Here it is here. Now, we have a little problem. Our paddle is facing the wrong way. We want it to be vertical, not horizontal. So we can fix this nice and easily by going down to our direction here. And you have this cool little pop-up. It's like a compass. And we can actually drag this arrow down. And we're going to bring it down to 180. And what you'll notice now is our paddle is vertical. Now, we're going to bring our paddle over to this side of the screen. And we're going to, once we build this, we're going to have another one over this side of the screen. But for the moment, now, we want to set this up so that we're going to use 2 keys on the keyboard. I'm going to set up Q and A. When we press Q, paddle's going to go up. When I press A, paddle's going to go down. We don't want the paddle to move left or right. So we are going to set it in this position here. So that's the very first thing we're going to do now in this bit of code. So as always, over to our code section, I'm going to click on events. And we're going to bring in one green flag is clicked. So, next thing is the setting the X position. So we're going to our motion blocks, and we're going to find the block set X to. Now, it's already set to -206, which is actually the X position of our paddle at the moment, which is perfect. Now, the next thing is we need to set up a forever loop. So inside our forever loop, as you guys know, the code will run as long as the game is running. So in this case, it's going to be our up and down buttons to make our paddle go up and down. So we do that now by simply bringing in 2 if-then loops. Okay? And we see our little diamond shapes here. This is where we're going to program our keys on the keyboard. Now, we do that, we go into our sensing section, and we're looking for the block key space pressed. I'm going to drag it in. See the way the diamond changes? Just for those of you who might find it a bit hard sometimes. There we go. Now, I'm going to use Q and A for my 2 buttons. So there is Q. That's going to be the up. And A is going to be down. Now, you guys can have whatever you want. You can have numbers, anything, it's up to you. You can use arrows as well. So we want to now be able, when we press Q or A, we want to change the Y numbers for our paddle. So we are going to go down now and find the block change Y by 10. And I'm going to drag this into each of our if-then loops. Now, if we were to run this now, we press Q, our paddle will go up, but also our paddle will go up if we pressed A. We don't want that. We want, when we press A, we want the paddle to go down. So I'm going to double click on the 10 and go minus 10. Now, if we run that, press the green flag, the paddle goes up. Oh, but it goes off screen, but then it comes back and it goes off screen again. That's okay. Now, we don't want it to go off screen, so we can do, I'm just going to press stop. What we can do to fix this is just use the block here, if on edge bounce. Okay, so if we try that again now, there. It won't allow our paddle to go off the screen. It's pretty cool. So that's all the code now for our first paddle. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set up our other paddle, and it's very straightforward. So below our game window, where we see our paddle sprite here, sprite again is another word for a graphic, I'm going to right click and I'm going to select duplicate. Now, the problem is we have two paddles the same color. So say, for example, now you want to change one of these paddles. All you do, I'm going to change paddle 2 now. I'm going to click over here on costumes. And I'm going to change the outline. Let's see now how this works. Select it, sorry, and then, whoop, there we go. I'm going to change it to red. There we are. Leave it at that. Now, see the way it's changed. That is cool. So we'll go back over to our code. Now, what you'll notice, because we've duplicated paddle, it's given it a name, paddle 2, but also it's copied over all the code we've just made, so we don't have to do it again. So I'm just going to position our paddle just over here like that. Now, what you'll notice, if we were to run this now, this paddle would shoot over to the left-hand side, because when we start, it's going to set X to minus 206, which is the position of this paddle. But we want to set it over here. So if we look just below our game window here, we have the X position, and currently, we'll just move it out a small bit. So 216. So if we change set X to 216, and then we want to pick two new keys. So I'm going to use P and L on my keyboard. So I'm going to go down here and pick P for going up and L for going down. Now, if I hit the green flag, I should be able, and they can't bounce off the screen, which is great. Perfect. That's it. Right, so now we have our paddles working. That is brilliant. Now, so the next thing we're going to do is we need to add in our ball. So I'm going to go down here to choose a sprite and go click in. Now, I'm going to use this ball here. So when we click it, it adds our ball in, and we have our ball sprite in listed down here. So what we want is we want this ball to be able to bounce around and off the paddles, but we want it to start in a random position, so we don't know which way it's going to start. Okay, so we are going to go off when green flag is clicked. Now we want the ball to start in the center of the screen every time. So we do that, we go up to motion, and you'll see the block go to X and Y with the two numbers. I'm going to change these both to 0. So what this does, every time a game starts, so regardless if I move the ball, it's always going to go back into the center. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to get the computer to pick a random direction for the ball to go. So we are going to bring in the block point in direction 90. Now, we're not going to keep it at 90. We're going to go into our operators, and we are going to find the block pick random 1 to 10. And I'm going to drag that now on top of the 90. And see the way I get the white line around? Release the mouse, and there we go. Now, just to give you an idea of what numbers to pick. So we bring up in our game window here the direction of our ball. Now at the moment it's set to 90, but we want it to be able to go from anywhere from say minus 130 all the way over to plus 130. So we were going to first block minus 130 and next one plus 130. So what that means is when this starts, it's going to go off in a random position. Now I tried to press the button there, but actually I didn't have the other code set up. So the next thing we need to do is actually set up the movement. So for that, we need a forever loop. So go into our control section, bring in our forever loop. Now, this is very straightforward. Into our motion, move 10 steps, and just to keep it from bouncing off the edge, if on edge, bounce. So now if we run it, there we go. We have our ball bouncing around the screen. Now what you notice, it's going through the paddles at the moment. That's fine, we haven't set that up. But if we were to click on the green flag, see the way it's going in a different direction? That's because we've set up the computer to pick a random degree between minus 130 and plus 130 degrees. It's pretty cool. And it'll always start in the center whenever we press the green flag because we have X and Y. You could change these to whatever you want for wherever you want it to start. Now, the next thing we need to do is to set up what happens when the ball interacts or hits off one of the paddles. How do we do that? So, we need to bring in two if-then loops. So, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in our first if-then loop. Now, the code's actually going to be the same if it hits both of these. So what we're going to do is we are going to go into our operator section, and we're going to bring in a block, two diamond shapes with an OR. Okay. Now, we can then bring in our sensing, and we're going to bring in the touching mouse pointer block twice. Now it kind of goes off screen a little bit there. And we're going to change each of these to paddle and paddle 2. Okay, so these are our two paddles. Now, what we want is when the ball hits the paddle, we want it to go back off in the opposite direction. So we can do that by going into our control section and bringing in point in direction 90. Now, we want to change, we don't want 90. We are going to make our own. So we go into our operator section. We're going to bring in this multiply. It's the two circle or kind of oval shapes with a little star between them. That's multiplication. And in the first one, we're going to do -1. And in the second circle, we're going to go into our motion and we're going to bring in direction. So it's going to multiply the direction by -1, which will make it go off in the opposite direction. So let's see if that works, and it is. There we go. And I am playing now with two sets of keys, and it's working, which is pretty cool. Now we have most of the functionality of our game working. Now what we need to do is set up a scoring system. So this is the cool part now. So the first thing we need to do is we need to think of how do we get a point. So we get a point if the ball, I'm just going to drag it here, hits this side or this side. But how do we determine who gets a point? So we can do a very simple way. If we go into our backdrop, and over here we click on our backdrop section, we're going to create two colored lines. So if the ball hits this colored line, player 2 is going to get a point. If the ball hits this side, player 1 is going to get a point. So, oops, just make sure we're back in our backdrop here. Now I'm going to create a rectangle, and I'm going to change the fill color. Now make sure it's a different color from your paddles. So I am going to pick yellow. Okay. I'm just going to draw, oops. Now, why is that doing that? we can actually zoom in on it as well and pull it out just a little bit. There we go. So that's it. You'll notice in our game window, it's actually updated. Now, we're going to select a different color. I am going to pick, let me see now. Yeah, going to pick that color there. And we're going to make another rectangle like there, or line, sorry. Now I'm using the zoom in so I can make it even smaller. That's perfect. And you'll notice now on our game window, we have the little purpley pink line here and we have the yellow line here. So we've our two lines set up. So the next thing we need to do now is we need to set up our variables. So we're going to click back on our ball section and go into our code tab here. Now we're going to click into our variables. Now we use variables in coding, if you remember, to store items or numbers or things. So in this case, we are going to use the variables to keep score for each player. Okay, so we're going to click on make a variable. This new box will pop up and I'm just going to call it player 1 and keep it checked for all sprites. And then I'm going to make another variable and just call it player 2. Now the name doesn't matter. You guys can have whatever name you want, but just make sure you know which is going to be which player is which. Okay. So when the game starts, you'll notice now we have our two players here. So I'm just going to drag player 2 over here and keep player 1 there. So every time we start the game, we want to make sure that each player starts at 0. So we do that. So make sure now on our ball sprite, I'm going to drag in, set my variable, and we can change my variable here to player 1. I'm going to drag another one in and change that to player 2. Now make sure these are outside the forever loop. We don't want them inside the forever loop or you won't be able to keep score because the loop will just keep resetting the score back to 0. So the next thing we need to do is we need to set up when the ball touches the color, we're going to add a point to whichever side. Okay, so staying here inside our forever loop, we're going to bring in 2 if-then loops. So if-then, if-then. Okay, so we're going to go now into our sensing section and you will see touching color. And we're going to bring one into each of the little diamond shapes. Now, in order to pick the color, now this is much easier than Scratch 2. It's also pretty cool. When I click this, we get this new color bar, but we want to use this color picker here. So when I click on that, it actually highlights our game window and we can only pick colors from our game window. And you'll see we can have this cool magnifying glass. So I'm going to hover over. And if you notice, when we've hovered over the color we want, the circle changes the same color. So we know that we've picked the right color. So we left click and that's picked it. We can now do the same for the other one here. So we're going to click over here and we're going to select our purple color. There we go. So we have our 2 colors. So now if the ball touches the yellow color, we want player 2 to get a point. If the ball touches the pinky color, we want player 1 to get a point. So we go over now to our variables and we bring in change my variable. We're going to change that to player 2 by 1. And then we're going to do the same here, but change that to player 1. So now, if I run the game, and if we let them hit, boom, there we go. Each player, the point system is now working. So that is pretty cool. So what we can do now, sometimes I found that when I start the game, it starts a little too quickly. So what we're going to do is, keeping on our ball sprite, we're just going to put a little wait. So we go into events, control section, and wait 1 second. And we're going to drag that just under when green flag is clicked. So what that does, that gives us, when we press the start button, or the green flag, it gives us a second so we can figure out where our balls and paddles are. Okay, So that's it. So now the next thing that you guys can try and do is try level up. See what happens then if you were to get 10 points. You could change the speed. You could also set up one paddle to be automated. But try it out. Check out some ideas. I'm going to have this version of this file saved below, so you can download and bring it up on your screen. But test it out. Have fun. Break it. Off you go.